Have you ever felt a heaviness inside you that you can't explain? A weight on your soul that shows up even when life seems normal? You're not sad, you're not anxious, you're not overwhelmed, at least not in a way that makes sense. But something inside feels tired, burdened, and strangely quiet. And no matter what you do, the heaviness doesn't go away. Most people think this heaviness is emotional. Some think it's physical exhaustion. Others assume it's stress, pressure, or just part of being human. But what if I told you that the heaviness you feel is not random, not psychological, and not circumstantial? What if the real cause is something far deeper, something spiritual, something almost no one talks about? Because listen carefully. Heaviness of the soul is not the same as sadness of the heart. Sadness responds to comfort, stress responds to rest, anxiety responds to reassurance. But heaviness stays even when everything else seems fine. And when your soul becomes heavy, it is a sign that something has shifted inside you. Something spiritual, something invisible, something important. There is a reason your soul feels heavy. And it has nothing to do with weakness, failure, or lack of faith. In fact, the heaviness may be revealing something God wants to address, something the enemy wants to take advantage of, and something your spirit has been trying to tell you, but you've been too distracted to hear. In today's message, you're going to discover the hidden cause behind soul heaviness, the cause most people never identify. And once you understand it, everything in your spiritual life will make sense. The heaviness is not random. It's a message. And today you're finally going to understand what your soul has been trying to say. There are moments when your soul feels heavy, and you can't point to a clear reason. Nothing dramatic happened, no crisis, nothing obvious changed, but something inside feels weighed down. You wake up tired, your thoughts feel slower, your desire for God is weaker, your heart feels distant. And the most confusing part is that everything around you seems normal, but inside, something is off. This heaviness is not random, and it's not only emotional. When the soul feels heavy without a clear explanation, it is almost always a spiritual signal. The soul is spiritual. It reacts before the mind understands. It senses danger, imbalance, pressure, or distance long before the body or emotions show signs. That is why many people feel heaviness but don't know where it comes from. The soul speaks first, and heaviness is one of its warnings. This heaviness usually appears for three reasons that most people never connect. The first is spiritual drift, not rebellion, not turning away from God on purpose. Drift, gradual distance, a slow decline in spiritual focus. You still believe, you still love God, but your connection weakens. Prayer becomes mechanical. Worship becomes rare. Your mind gets occupied with responsibilities. Your heart gets distracted, and without noticing, your spirit runs on low strength. When the connection with God weakens, the soul feels the weight immediately. Distance creates heaviness. The second cause is spiritual pressure, the kind that comes from attacks you don't discern. Attacks that don't look dramatic, attacks that come through thoughts, confusion, discouragement, unusual exhaustion, or sudden lack of desire for the things of God. The enemy doesn't always attack loudly. Most of the time he attacks quietly, by draining your focus, weakening your clarity, or pressing against your spirit until the pressure becomes weight. That weight feels like heaviness. The third cause is internal wounds that were never healed correctly. Things you lived through, things you survived, things you ignored. Situations that marked you but you moved on from quickly because you had no choice. The soul stores everything that was not brought to God. Disappointments, silent frustrations, emotional fatigue, unresolved memories, unspoken fears. When the soul is carrying too much for too long, heaviness appears. So heaviness is not one problem. It is the combination of these three areas working at the same time. Distance from God, spiritual pressure, and emotional weight. All three create a spiritual environment inside you that becomes hard to carry. But pay attention, the heaviness is not the enemy. The heaviness is the warning. Heaviness means your soul reached its capacity. Heaviness means the spiritual balance broke. Heaviness means you are carrying something that must be addressed. Heaviness means God is trying to call your attention to something deeper. You may notice other signs around the heaviness. difficulty praying, unusual irritability, lack of spiritual hunger, confusion in simple decisions, emotional instability, inner tiredness, even after rest. These are not random symptoms. They follow the heaviness because the soul is struggling to function the way God created it to function. The soul gets heavy when something is draining its strength. The soul gets heavy when something is missing. The soul gets heavy when something is unresolved. Many people try to treat heaviness the wrong way. They think rest will fix it. They think distraction will fix it. They think entertainment will fix it. They think taking a break from everything will fix it. But the heaviness doesn't leave. Because heaviness is not a physical issue. It is spiritual. The soul does not get lighter with escape. It gets lighter with truth. It gets lighter with alignment. It gets lighter when what is wrong on the inside is brought before God. Right now, the heaviness you feel may be pointing to something very specific, something that needs attention, something God wants to address, something the enemy wants to use, or something your heart can't carry anymore. Your soul is not heavy without a reason, and the reason is deeper than you think. Another major cause of soul heaviness, one that most people never identify, is a silent spiritual attack. These attacks do not look dramatic, and they rarely show up through obvious signs. The enemy works quietly. He prefers subtlety because subtle attacks pass unnoticed, and what goes unnoticed grows stronger. A silent spiritual attack usually begins with changes that seem normal at first. You feel more tired than usual. Your thoughts become scattered. Your motivation disappears. You feel distant from God, even though you didn't do anything wrong. You wake up feeling drained for no clear reason. Your emotions feel unsteady. It looks natural, but the root is spiritual. This is how the enemy operates. When he cannot destroy, he drains. When he cannot break, he weakens. When he cannot stop your faith, he tries to suffocate it slowly. The heaviness you feel may be the result of this slow suffocation. The enemy aims at your spirit because he knows that when your spirit is weak, every other area becomes vulnerable. 1. The attack often begins in the mind. The enemy targets your thoughts because thoughts affect emotions, focus, and spiritual sensitivity. He plants ideas that create internal pressure. You're tired of trying. Nothing is changing. You're on your own. God is distant. Your prayers don't matter. These statements feel like your own thoughts, but they are not. They are spiritual suggestions meant to produce heaviness. Once the mind accepts these impressions, the soul begins to carry weight that does not belong to it. 2. The attack also targets your emotions. Silent spiritual attacks often create emotional shifts without explanation. You feel irritated, discouraged, or overwhelmed, even though nothing major happened around you. These emotional changes are not random. They are pressure points. The enemy uses emotions as tools to destabilize your spiritual posture. A tired soul is vulnerable, and emotional instability is one of the first signs of spiritual pressure. 3. The attack disrupts your spiritual appetite. When someone is under spiritual attack, their desire for prayer, worship, and scripture declines. Not because they stopped loving God, but because their spirit is being pressed. The enemy knows that if he can remove your hunger, he can weaken your strength. A believer without hunger loses discernment, and without discernment the attack becomes harder to recognize. This loss of appetite is not normal fatigue, it is interference. 4. The attack creates confusion. Confusion is one of the clearest signs of spiritual warfare. When the enemy is working, simple decisions feel heavy, thoughts become unclear, and situations that once seemed obvious start to feel complicated. Confusion is spiritual fog. Its purpose is to disconnect you from spiritual clarity and make you question what you already know. When confusion rises, heaviness follows. 5. The attack isolates your heart. Silent attacks push you away from the things and people who strengthen you spiritually. You begin to feel less connected, less supported, and less understood. You withdraw emotionally. You pray less. You stop sharing what you feel. The enemy isolates because isolation weakens spiritual resistance. When your soul is under attack, one of the first symptoms is this sense of inner isolation, a feeling that you are fighting alone. 6. The attack attempts to exhaust your spirit. Spiritual exhaustion feels different from physical exhaustion. You can rest your body and still feel tired inside. You can sleep and still wake up drained. When the enemy applies pressure, he wears down your spiritual stamina. This makes every task, even small ones, feel heavier than they should. This is not laziness, it is warfare. 7. The attack aims to disconnect you from God's voice. The enemy cannot silence God, but he can interfere with your ability to hear. When heaviness comes from an attack, you feel spiritually numb. You struggle to feel God's presence. You feel disconnected, even though God is still near. The goal is not to make you stop believing. It is to make you believe nothing is happening spiritually. This illusion creates heaviness because your soul was created to stay aligned with the voice of God. Silent attacks produce visible symptoms: heaviness without explanation, fatigue without cause, loss of hunger for God, emotional sensitivity, mental fog, low motivation, inner pressure. These are not random, they are spiritual signs. If you feel this kind of heaviness, you are not weak. You are being targeted. And the attack is subtle because the enemy hopes you will not discern it. Your soul becomes heavy when you are fighting a battle you don't realize is spiritual. Our third cause of soul heaviness, one that many believers overlook because it does not look spiritual at first, is the weight of unhealed internal wounds. These wounds are not always dramatic, and they don't need to come from major trauma to affect your spirit. A wound is anything that left a mark on your heart, but was never brought fully to God for healing. Many people move on quickly from painful moments, but moving on is not the same as being healed. The soul holds whatever the heart hides, and when these unresolved areas stay inside for months or years, they eventually become weight. A wound that is not healed becomes a burden. A burden that is not released becomes heaviness. This heaviness is spiritual because the soul was never designed to carry emotional weight indefinitely. God gave the soul the ability to feel, but he never intended it to carry those feelings alone. There are several types of internal wounds that create heaviness. 1. Unresolved disappointment. Disappointment is one of the heaviest burdens a soul can carry. Not because the event itself was overwhelming, but because disappointment challenges trust. You expected something to happen. You prayed. You believed. You hoped. And when things didn't turn out the way you imagined, a quiet wound formed inside. Even if you accepted the outcome, the disappointment may still be alive within you. This unprocessed disappointment drains the soul slowly. It creates heaviness because the heart is carrying tension between what you wanted and what actually happened. 2. Silent discouragement. Discouragement does not always appear through tears or emotional breakdowns. Sometimes it shows up as a quiet sense of, "I'm tired," "I don't know anymore," or "What's the point?" When these thoughts stay inside without being surrendered to God, they create a spiritual weight. Your heart becomes divided between wanting to believe and struggling to keep going. Discouragement becomes heaviness when you try to face it alone. 3. Suppressed emotions. Many believers do not feel comfortable admitting their emotions to God. They avoid expressing sadness, frustration, confusion, or fear because they worry it shows weakness. But suppressing emotions does not make them disappear. It hides them inside the soul, where they quietly grow. When emotions are not acknowledged in the presence of God, they turn into inner weight. The soul gets tired from holding what was never released. 4. Past hurts you moved on from, but never healed. Life forces people to move on quickly. Responsibilities continue. People expect strength and time does not stop. But when you move forward without healing, the pain goes with you. It becomes part of your spiritual foundation, and everything built on top of that pain becomes unstable. The heaviness appears because the soul is carrying pain it never had the chance to unload. 5. Words that wounded you. A single negative sentence, especially from someone you trusted, can leave a deep mark. Words shape identity, self-worth, and spiritual confidence. And when painful words are not confronted with truth, they become weight. The soul carries the echo of what was said even years later. Heaviness often appears when the soul is still living under the influence of words God never spoke. 6. Expectations that failed. When you expect something strongly, a relationship, a season, an opportunity, and it falls apart, the soul experiences a collapse. Even if you accepted it outwardly, the disappointment can remain inside. This creates heaviness because the soul is holding the gap between expectation and reality. How these wounds create heaviness. Unhealed wounds affect the soul in three major ways. First, they drain spiritual strength. You spend energy holding things inside that should have been surrendered to God. This constant internal effort leads to spiritual exhaustion. Second, they block spiritual clarity. Pain becomes a filter. You begin to interpret life, decisions, and even God through the lens of what hurt you. This creates confusion and heaviness. Third, they interfere with your connection to God. Not because God moves away, but because pain creates internal noise. It becomes harder to pray deeply, worship sincerely, or sense God clearly. The heaviness grows because your heart is carrying too much. The soul was not created to store pain. Pain needs movement. It needs expression. It needs surrender. When pain stays inside, it becomes pressure. When pressure stays inside, it becomes heaviness. Nothing weighs more than a wound you never brought to God. If you feel heaviness without understanding why, it may be the weight of something from your past that your soul has kept stored, something God is ready to confront and heal. Heaviness is the soul saying, "You cannot move forward fully until this is addressed." When the soul becomes heavy, God does not expect you to fix it by yourself. He does not tell you to be stronger or push through. The weight lifts when you follow specific spiritual steps, steps that bring the soul back into alignment, back into strength, and back into the presence that restores. Heaviness leaves when three areas are addressed clearly and intentionally. Your connection with God, the spiritual pressure coming against you, the internal wounds inside you. If even one of these areas stays unresolved, the heaviness returns. That's why many people feel better for a moment, but sink back into the same weight later. They treated the surface, not the root. Here is how the soul begins to heal and regain strength. 1. The soul becomes lighter when you return to intentional communion with God. The first step is not emotional, it is not dramatic, and it does not require a spiritual moment. It requires intentional reconnection. The heaviness began when the distance grew, so the first movement must be toward closeness. Not perfection, not long prayers, not intense emotions, just closeness. The soul responds to God's presence the same way the body responds to oxygen, naturally and immediately. Even if you do not feel anything at first, your spirit begins to regain strength as soon as you turn your heart toward Him. This is where many people fail. They wait to feel ready before returning to God, but the soul becomes ready after returning, not before. Returning to God means opening your heart, honestly talking to Him without filters, bringing the inner weight into His presence, surrendering instead of hiding, letting Him speak into areas you avoided. Heaviness cannot stay where the presence of God becomes active again. 2. The soul becomes lighter when you confront spiritual pressure. You cannot treat a spiritual attack with emotional tools. You also cannot ignore it, hoping it disappears. The enemy pushes as long as you stay passive. There are 3 practical steps. The channel modello sempre applica. A. Identify the attack for what it is. Say it clearly. This heaviness is not natural. This pressure is spiritual. Discernment is the first form of defense. B. Resist the attack through spoken truth. Silent thoughts do not defeat spiritual pressure. Your spirit needs your voice. Declare what God says, not what the pressure suggests. Declarations like, "God is with me. My mind belongs to the Lord. Every spiritual attack will fail. My spirit will not be weakened." These are not motivational phrases, they are spiritual resistance. C. Realign your mind daily. Attacks succeed through repetition. Resistance must also be repetitive. A believer who confronts the attack consistently sees heaviness lift quickly. When you confront the attack, the pressure breaks and the soul starts to breathe again. 3. The soul becomes lighter when the internal wounds are finally exposed to God. The soul cannot heal from what it hides. You cannot bury something in your heart and expect it to disappear. Nothing heals in the dark. Everything heals in the light of God. This healing process has 3 steps. A. Acknowledge what hurt you, not to dwell on it, but to stop carrying it. Many people feel heavy because they refuse to admit they were affected. B. Bring the wound into God's presence. This is not a long emotional prayer, it is simple. Lord, this still hurts. I give it to you. God heals what you surrender. C. Replace the wound with truth. Pain creates lies. Healing requires replacing them with what God says. Truth pushes out the weight. Internal wounds lose power when they are exposed to the presence of God. This is where the soul regains stability, clarity, and identity. 4. The soul becomes lighter when you stop carrying what doesn't belong to you. A heavy soul often carries responsibilities that are not spiritual assignments. You carry the weight of people, situations, outcomes, expectations, and fears that God never asked you to carry. Heaviness grows when you assume a role you were never meant to fulfill. There is freedom in saying, Lord, this is yours, not mine. Surrender is not weakness, it is spiritual order. 5. The soul becomes lighter when you allow God to restore your inner rhythm. A restored soul has clarity, peace, sensitivity, hunger, direction, stability. These things return gradually as you respond to God intentionally. A heavy soul becomes a restored soul when the presence becomes priority. The attack is resisted, the wounds are surrendered, the weight is given to God. The heaviness lifts because the root was addressed. If your soul has been feeling heavy, now you understand why. Heaviness is not random. It is not personality. It is not just stress. It is a sign. It reveals where your spirit is tired, where the enemy has been pressuring you, and where your heart is still wounded. But here is something important. Heaviness is not permanent. It lifts when the root is addressed. It lifts when the soul realigns. It lifts when you stop carrying the weight alone. God restores what is surrendered. He strengthens what is weak. He heals what has been ignored. He lifts what has been pressing on you. You don't need to force yourself to feel better. You just need to bring the right things to the right place, the presence of God. If this message spoke to your heart, take a moment and make this declaration in the comments. Lord, lift the heaviness from my soul. Your comment is not just engagement. It is a step of faith, and faith has power. And before you leave, make sure you subscribe to this channel. More messages like this will help you understand what is happening inside you, strengthen your spiritual life, and guide you with truth when your soul needs direction. Also, leave a like, because this helps this message reach more people who are carrying a weight they can't explain. People who need exactly what you received today. You are not alone. God is with you. And your soul will not remain heavy.